appreciate that.
And we have Ojani. He bought the conference footage where you're talking about mindset, personal finance, and stock for dummies.
Absolutely. And this is an important time to think about stock for dummies because they're going on sale very soon. And the last 2 days have been very hot in the stock market. I have probably sold maybe 80% of my portfolio. And so I'm excited for it to take another dip so I can dive back in.
Difficult. There's always going to be one group of people who are extremely up and going a long time. And the universe has swings and balances because as soon as you block points of view, you have absolute tyranny.
And in a way, it's sort of self-defeating, isn't it? Because you carried on getting huge attention. It was interesting to me that when you came on the show, for example, we've had, I think, nearly 6 million people have viewed the whole interview that we did, which is a huge number of people, certainly far higher than watched it on conventional television. So you have a whole world out there online.
Increasingly, people are fanatical, I think in part due to the very poor educational system. When you reach a certain level of popularity, and in today's era where you certainly do have fanatical supporters, it is hard to cancel you when you get to that very high level that Andrew Tate got to. And also when there's money involved. Piers Morgan has clearly invited Andrew Tate back because he had more views than ever when Andrew Tate was on his platform. And that's why he's bringing Tate back again to discuss that something that Tate might not even necessarily be well informed on or qualified to speak on. This is a bit peripheral to Andrew Tate. I mean, Andrew Tate is not Elon. He's not currently a tech entrepreneur.
But I think that everybody needs a voice to a degree, and social media platforms are now the most important platforms on the planet. They control information and they influence real world decisions, and they influence people's perception of reality. The last few years of COVID have been a perfect example of what happens when you censor one side of the argument and you only allow one point of view to be purported by the matrix in and of itself, and that's how you end up in tyrannical situations. I think you were just discussing that, Piers.
This was a brilliant response by Andrew Tate, the best that I've heard so far in this interview, and I very much so agree with it. And he spoke to many truths, one of which is that, and I don't agree with him that it's a good thing. He said everyone should have a voice. Well, that's not true. In terms of interpersonal communication, yeah, sure, one-on-one, but not everyone should have a platform, meaning that, seeing a large following for individuals who are terribly uneducated, not very bright, and clearly are morally inequipped. I don't think they should have a large following. They should have the opportunity to pursue it. But I think when you find someone like that has a large following, it is merely a reflection of the decay of the society. When you see a Kim Kardashian that has a large following, this is clearly an indication of the low level of the society. Just like anytime you experience a dictator, the likes of whom commit mass murder, that this is not because they're an individual person that's a degenerate, but because the society is suffering significant levels of degeneracy, right? Because after all, one person can't commit mass murder. It takes coordination and it takes cooperation of the masses. So that's something we have to acknowledge. And so, yeah, I think those are the major points that Tate was speaking to.
Yeah, I think that's a perfectly valid point. People have quite rightly held me to task over some of the positions I took during the COVID pandemic, notably when the scientists said as a definitive fact that you couldn't transmit the virus if you had the vaccine. It turned out that wasn't true. And I based my observations on that supposed fact. And so
I respect Piers, not in general, but in this instance, for him being honest about the fact that the governments, seemingly in coordination, the governments of the world, told populations that things were true that they knew not to be true, and they did it on purpose. And in the case of the Joe Biden administration, they even went so far as to say that certain medicines were necessary, and I'm trying not to use certain words because of the serious censorship on this platform. But the Biden administration paid money to all of the major media outlets, including Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, so that they could push their narrative. You have a show called Piers Morgan. You had Kanye West on your show, and then when you uploaded the clip of him, you had him bleeped out, which is the actual definition of censorship. You censored what he was saying.
I think the healthiest thing for any democracy is for all views to be aired and debated. We seem to have lost the ability to debate. You know, when I interviewed you, yeah, we had a few fractious moments, but actually I thought it was a pretty spirited debate between people who perhaps had, you know, preconceived views of each other. And I've got no problem interviewing you now about these because I think you have an interesting take on this stuff.
See, Piers is rarely telling the actual truth. He's suggesting that he's interviewing Andrew Tate because Andrew Tate is on the other side of the aisle politically. But in reality, he's interviewing Andrew Tate because Andrew Tate is a star and he's bringing in views, which brings in revenue. And this is why, you know, capitalism is all good. And I'm a fervent capitalist, but we have to, you know, have capitalism paired with some level of morality and honesty. And also understand that, as Wu-Tang said, cream, cash rules everything around me. And so often you can understand the world better through these two lenses, the lens of money and the lens of sex. If you can apply those two lenses, the world will often come clear to you.
And that's the key to life. When you reach that level of adolescence in your mindset where you can't handle any point of view that is contrary to your own, then you're truly a broken person. And that's what the internet is purporting. It's very interesting you said about Twitter being tribal. There's a large contingent of people on Twitter who simply cannot handle reading an opinion which differs from their own. And that is a degree of immaturity that we do not need adults to be functioning with in the modern world.
No,
Andrew Tate puts forward a very meaningful thesis, which is the immaturity thesis. I actually heard this a while back from a Yale neuroscientist, a guy who runs something called the Montana Academy. And I heard this when I was at Johns Hopkins Medical. And he had mentioned that a lot of the children that he works with that are, you know, broken when they come to him, they're mostly suffering immaturity, not clinical depression, not, you know, fill in the blank. He says it's old-fashioned immaturity, which, you know, we often don't have a scientific diagnosis for. And I think that this is certainly the case, that we find significant levels of immaturity, grown men spending inordinate amounts of time playing video games. What is the concept of trolling? Trolling online is really just people have too much spare time, no purpose in life, and they're making a game of things that are not a game. Immaturity. So I think he was really accurate in that. Understand. And it was mentioned earlier from Tate, when you have an uneducated population or you have people who are very immature ideologues, there is no compromise. There's no coming to a middle ground, particularly if you're dealing with those who are insane. And as a result, you have to engage in warfare. Unfortunately, the kind of warfare that we observe today is really just led by, you know, evil, power-hungry individuals. We rarely see noble warfare, right? Like when World War II, that was something we could call noble war. But since then, when have we had an instance where it was so clear that one side was wicked and the other side was on the side of good? You know, so if you're going to displace power holders, you're going to have to do it violently.
Okay, we have Major Mind and Soul said, tuition, peace to the saints. Your content is imperative, saint. Don't stop no matter what.
I really do appreciate that. That means a lot. And not only will we continue pumping out great content and be prolific about it, we're also growing the organization.
The appalling censorship of the New York Post exclusive about Hunter Biden, the son of the president, about his laptop. This is 3 weeks before the election that Joe Biden won. He was heading, you know, to a possible victory, but it was tight. And that story, they reckon, could have tipped it either way. But it was completely suppressed and censored, starting with Twitter, then Facebook, then others. Twitter literally locked out the New York Post account for 2 weeks for breaking a completely true story. I thought that was shameful.
I mean, beyond shameful, it's criminal. And the question is, why are there no consequences for government officials? And I think Hillary Clinton is the first one we want to start with. And I guess it runs in the family to be corrupt in her case. But that's what we want to start with, which is, why are there no consequences? Where's the accountability for the government? You know, they can go and commit murder. That's war, by the way. War, that's murder. That's what that is. They have different terms for it when the government does it. But when you do it to protect your home or your property, then it's called murder, and you have to go on trial. And I can create a channel, if we don't already have one, for that state and or city. Like, we have significant concentrations of, you know, members in Texas, in Southern California, in South Florida, in the Northeast, in Chicago, and much else, in United Kingdom and Canada and Sweden. And I could go on for a while. So that would be a great starting point. But mostly I recommend that you want to link with people who are in your industry and in your hobbies of interest. I like salsa dancing. So as soon as I show up in a town, I look up the lessons, I look up the social dancing, and I show up on that scene. And then also you should be going to meetups. It's going to help you advance in your career and make friends and colleagues. Thank you for that question.
Worse than shameful. It's worse than shameful. When you control information, you control the real world. They affect the real world in real time. They are genuinely affecting the reality people live in. They are not just a company. They're not just a social media platform. It affects absolutely every single person on the planet when it changes who is elected. I don't want to comment specifically on Hunter Biden or the laptop. I would never kill myself, but I don't think it's fair that.
I love it. What I like about Tate in this interview is that he's coming hard and he's coming consistently hard. He's not playing games or holding his tongue. He's not being vulgar, but he's certainly not biting his tongue. And similarly, I'd also like to announce that I'd never kill myself either. It seems like we all need to say it.
They would hide certain key information that close to an election. And the fact that they've done that was done specifically to affect the world that we all live in. And we all have to suffer the consequences of those things. So to sit and say that these companies can just do whatever they want and they're private, et cetera. No, free speech is beyond important for democracy. It's important for the reality that we exist under.
He's spoken a lot of truth here. I always seek to get even closer to the root of things. And we have to remember that even if you have freedom of speech, you still need the ability to be able to interpret what is said, to understand what is said, to judge if it is reasonable and right, to put it to the test using what you've been schooled on and using your intellect. And you see, intellect is all good, but the school does something meaningful. It provides you with the wisdom and knowledge of ages. It provides you with frameworks. It provides you with perspective. So, for example, you wouldn't know the concept of a red herring. You wouldn't know how to call out a logical fallacy unless you took a course in philosophy. So schooling is important, and the public school system is in great disrepair. So I think that's the number one place to start the repair is the public education. In my case, I would only send my kids private, and I hope that at some point we have a private school that we can send the saints to that we own and operate. But that's step one. And then step two, once you've educated the public appropriately, then they can tell when they're not getting the whole story. And if they do get the whole story, they have the framework to be able to interpret the information and put it to the test of, is this good information?
Okay, we have Ty just bought that P hat.
In a real way. And shout out. I bought it too.
You can see it as good on camera, but it's a nice corduroy hat.
Oh, they can't see the corduroy? That hurts my
as much as
heart.
you can in person.
Yes, indeed. And the P is stitched so clean. And we actually took a great effort to make sure that this thread is the exact same color as this thread. You dig? Hoodie's linked in the description.
And the hat is now linked in the chat.
Booyah. And when we hear the term bankruptcy, we tend to think one thing. There are different chapters or categories or legal terms for bankruptcy, which is to say there are different implications. There are two types of bankruptcy to consider when you're looking at public corporations, which is Chapter 7 and Chapter 11. And I always like to go into this stuff a little bit because you guys are business people. You guys are leaders. You guys own stock. You guys want to know what's happening with your money. The funny thing about me, when I own some stock, I try to start supporting that business. I recently bought some stock in a particular grocery store chain. I was like, I got to stop ordering my groceries on Amazon. Anyways, Chapter 7. Chapter 7 bankruptcy is the kind where you're basically going out of business. It's all bad. Closure, liquidation. And what you need to understand with regards to Twitter is if they file Chapter 7, that means pretty much Elon bought a dead company and he was like, I thought I could revive it, but I couldn't, and everybody's losing out. It's bad for everyone. I highly doubt that's the case. It wouldn't make sense to buy a business and then turn it Chapter 7. It's just not sensible. This rarely happens straight away. He might go to Chapter 11 and then end up in Chapter 7, but Chapter 7 is basically the dead end. Now, what you should know as a stockholder is what happens if I own stock in a business and the business files for bankruptcy, Chapter 7 in particular? Well, that means that the business is stopping its operations and going out of business, and you're usually going to end up with nothing. But if you do get some money out of your stock that you own for that business that goes bankrupt, this is what happens first. there's a pecking order. So first the government gets paid. Shocker. The government gets paid because the government needs the money. Does the government have to feed its children? No, but it needs the money more than you do, apparently. So the government gets paid first. They get to take the taxes that are owed. Then the banks, the banksters get paid after that. Oh, do the banks need the money? Do banks not have money? I thought they have money. Do banks have, they need to pay for their kids' college? Nope, but they still get the money before you and I. So banks get paid, which are, people who own debt that the company owes. Then the preferred shareholders get paid, which could be the company's founders, i.e. the same people who have crashed it. And then lastly, common stock gets paid, which is you and I, the American citizen. We get paid last when the company files for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. And here's the funny thing. You only get a portion of your money, if any. So you might get $0 or you might just get a portion, which is to say that, say you have $30,000 worth of stock in a given company and that corporation goes Chapter 7. You might end up getting like $8 or $0 or $100. Who knows? But you'll be the last to get paid. Anyways, Chapter 11. That's another kind of bankruptcy, which is more so the leaders trying to reorganize the corporation so that they can make it profitable. And this is a reasonable thing, and this provides a good opportunity, especially if you're looking at a business that you truly believe and have good data on, that it has good leadership, and that it's a future-oriented industry. Clearly, when they file Chapter 11, that stock price is about to start tanking. There's no doubt about that, which means you can pick it up very cheaply. And if you hold on to it for a couple of years, it might shoot up in a very significant way. It's almost like getting an IPO at low cost. So it's highly risky, but highly profitable if it goes well. I just wanted to, point out that for you, because during these kinds of times, this is when you might see some companies starting to file for Chapter 11. Now, if it's a newspaper company filing for Chapter 11, don't buy it. It's all bad. They're going to eventually be in Chapter 7. Have no fear. It's going to happen. So I hope that was pretty useful to you in terms of understanding what does it mean when a corporation or a company chooses bankruptcy. Now, who are the real enemies? Who are the real ones? China. And also China. Oh, and don't forget about China. Yeah, that's your real actual enemy, the one who buys up a bunch of real estate in America, right here in Las Vegas, for example, has significant interests. The one that actually owns America, and not only do they own America from the top level, but they also own us from the bottom level as they make everything that we buy. Yeah, they are our factory. They are our core. Okay, they're also financing us, giving us loans. That's curious. And they also have a population that's so big, if we ever actually got into a conflict, we wouldn't be able to beat them without breaking Geneva Conventions. Yes. Okay. They have more gifted and talented students than we have students. No, that's the threat. Oh, yeah. And in our top tier universities, our public universities like Berkeley, for example, places where we have invented significant weaponry, like our advanced weapon systems. Yeah, they're overpopulating those universities with Chinese nationals, not Chinese people, but Chinese citizens, which takes opportunity away from Americans, but more importantly means that our future engineers, chemists won't be here. They'll be there. And we also have brain drain and the theft of intellectual capital and possible infiltration and double agents. Yeah, that's crazy. That's our real enemy.
Okay, we have Donovan said, make sure you like it up. And Donovan also wanted to get on the stock knowledge, so he bought the conference footage talking about the stocks.
And that particular episode in the conference is not only good for the stock, but also just how do you allocate your personal earnings for a given month. And then as you advance as an entrepreneur, as a business person, or as your income grows, how do you reallocate appropriately so that you can provide for yourself? Because at the end of the day, we know that the government probably is not going to take good care of you in your old age. We don't want a government that's looking into us as citizens. We want a government that's serving us, that's supporting us. What I'm trying to figure out is, why is it my entire life to go into the DMV is a terrible experience? Long lines, unpleasant people, archaic processes. Hey, send this via fax. Fax? Fax machine? When I was at the DMV recently, and it's one of the few places you can't send your assistant, you got to go. I'm there, and then they walk by and announce, all of our computer systems are down. We don't know when they're going to be up. What? And it was ironic that they're talking about computer systems because I'm holding a paper application. I got to fill out a paper application in 2022. Yet when they're tracking you, then they use the latest of technology. When they're trying to help you, fax this. Here's a paper. Write it out with a pen. And don't steal our pen. And by the way, there was someone walking around the DMV. Their actual job was to make sure that no one stole the ink pens. But when they're tracking you, all of a sudden, America has great technology. It's amazing, the technology, when they're tracking you.
None of the above is back. He said, how long are the conference footages and are they delivered instantly upon purchase?
Yes, they are delivered instantly upon purchase. And if for some reason you're not able to access it, just send us an email. We'll get it to you. And the conference footages, so conference 1, 2, and 3, you buy the whole conference. And so they're varying lengths of time. In some cases, quite long, all the footage collectively. Conference 4, we're doing something different. We're releasing it by episode so people can say, hey, I'm interested in this particular topic. So like, for example, a lot of people really, really, really want to know what's an NFT. So for example, you can buy that particular episode and learn what an NFT is.